was not guilty.
Premeditated. They're still working on other ways.
People found that Pistorius was a very poor witness.
What happened? Naga? What happened?
You know Oscar Pistorius, the guy who killed his girlfriend.
Yes. Yeah.
So he was tried not guilty. I didn't know that.
Well, I don't know if any of us have faith in the justice system anymore.
Yeah.
Also, you know Bars.
I do know Bar.
Yeah.
Do you know Bar?
Yeah, he's like one of the warmest human beings I've ever
I
met.
know, he's here now.
He's in London. Wait,
No,
is he
he's
here now?
here.
Are you fucking serious?
Yeah, he's here. He's in Paris. He came and we're gonna meet up tomorrow.
I have to see him and hug him. Oh my god.
He's home with his boyfriend.
I know. They're so cute on Facebook. I don't
I
really
know,
know
I should
actually.
have asked you if you know him.
That is so funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. I used to live with a guy who was one of the models for one of his sculptures during his show in the church.
I don't know any of Bar's work. I know Bar as a curator. This is how we met, basically.
He's also a good arts practitioner.
Okay, great.
Yeah. That's sweet. I love how small the queer world is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's, write to him. He's here.
Well,
Alright,
no,
and
that I know
give me
that.
one moment. I'm doing it on YouTube.
Actually, we should invite him for a drink.
I was gonna say, like, is the gala, is it like just a thing? Like, is it open? Do we know what's happening?
Which one?
The thing that we're gonna do after this. Is it a dinner?
Is it dinner or just a drink?
He did.
But he's not here. He's not easy.
No, I can only get a very
Oh, crazy that he's not here. So, but,
Fair.
yeah. No, but let's, if you have his friend, because
I don't have.
I have his French number.
You need the French.
Is it the same French number? I have a very old number.
But you can use the.
If you want, I can text him right now.
Yeah.
Because I have a French plan, so it doesn't.
Or you just download the.
Yeah, but I can be like, Bar.
Okay, hold on.
Oh, do you want his number?
Just remake
Of course.
No. Okay. No, it's
He's amazing. I love him. We literally kind of just met.
Yeah?
You know, because we're friends. Do you know Tarek?
Yeah. Which there
Saeed
might.
de Montfort.
Huh?
Saeed de Montfort.
No, I don't know who
He's
that is.
really
Yeah.
amazing. Okay, wait. No. He's also here now. Everybody's here.
Definitely not that one then.
So this is
His number.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
No. It's
Fucking
the rest.
06 66 66.
Yeah, 56.
Lucky him. Oh, it's the same number. Okay, great.
alright.
So you tell me when we're ready. I
Yes.
guess that you're ready, but the
I'm having an issue putting it on
connection and
YouTube.
everything.
It's on Google Hangouts, but it's not on YouTube. Okay. I'm having trouble putting it on YouTube. It's supposed to be. I should be able to do it through here, but this isn't the right.
Yeah, but maybe you need to install the Flash player to be in YouTube. I don't know. So,
Okay.
can't you?
That's just for the Hangout.
Yeah. Good. So.
Beto, maybe we can move the screen itself.
Move the screen? Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe. Is it?
Because you're not
Does it
not
move?
on it properly. Can you make it come up? Oh, you
I
want to
think
move this
I
screen?
think it needs to go to the.
Can't you put
Yeah.
on YouTube on yours? I don't know.
Yeah, it's already.
Yeah,
I'm
perfect.
already on my YouTube page.
It's too much.
Okay, so what's
No, but maybe we move
Okay.
the projection.
Okay.
You know, we move the projection because that way we won't have it on the well now. Oh, no, no.
Something happened with the connection. Maybe.
It went yellow.
Yeah, but it will come back. It will come back. Yeah, here we go.
Hopefully. Oh, is it going through?
Yeah, here
something?
it's okay
Passing
now.
through?
It's okay now.
It's good now.
It's okay now.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Why is it off the screen though?
Here we
It
go.
needs to be raised up. Does anyone have?
Yeah, there are a couple of books there.
No,
Here,
nothing.
get a couple books.
We can do it.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
We'll start with the legs. Shouldn't need a time.
Although then it will have a angle.
So then it will need keystoning?
Yeah.
Or?
Like this?
I'm still keystoning logos.
The books here. Can I use these?
Yeah.
Like this, maybe.
Is that working?
Yeah, we have the yellow.
Woohoo! I think it's working.
Capturing on the top.
Okay.
The V in Google Hangouts.
Okay, I have something. This is YouTube. Okay, that's not the. That doesn't seem to be the correct link. I don't know. Let's just try. I don't know if this is the link for YouTube.
Copier? Yeah, maybe. Yes. Glass, watch. Yeah, it should be. Coller. Okay. Watch events. Yeah, I guess. Okay.
Let's see what's the link
Yeah.
for you. Yeah. Can somebody try the? Is anybody on the YouTube? Are you on the YouTube page? Can you try the link I just posted on the Facebook
Facebook.
page, and see if that goes to the YouTube live streaming?
You want me to go to the Facebook page?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And the last link I just
Oh, yeah.
posted.
Well, maybe. So we start.
Yeah.
We have never been queer Thursday.
So this we never been queer is almost we never been in this seminar.
Well, it's gonna go on YouTube.
Is that the YouTube?
No,
No?
No.
It's not going.
no.
Oh, it's
Don't
just
have
live.
permission to go on
It's just live.
Cool. Okay, let's.
You have
Oh, okay.
something like a 15-second delay.
Okay. Yeah, that's normal on YouTube. Cool. All right.
So the framing is from the edge of Jack's ear to
Okay.
you have yet to
Is okay?
position your camera.
There we go.
You could put it in maybe on this framework. Like, I don't know how
Okay, you do it.
it's okay?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I will
as,
do it.
It's like a 5-minute delay. It's quite a long delay.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's just. Should we just go ahead and start and not have the YouTube link work? Okay. Or
YouTube should work out too.
somebody just posted that that's not the YouTube. John.
Okay.
Okay, like
Okay,
let's start.
yeah.
Put
I
like
think
Google
we
Plus.
should start, yeah. So welcome everyone. The intimate small group of friends and people that we gather together every day here at the Kandinsky Library in Paris, and the people that are connected to the internet as well. Well, this is the last session of this seminar, and of course, after hearing the absolutely compelling critique of the grand narrative, it's more and more difficult for me to try to do what I'm doing, right? But at the same time, I think the one way of being in dialogue with that critique and making that critique productive to the project and the book that I'm trying to write, is thinking of the whole project as a sort of a retrospective science fiction, right, in a way. So instead of thinking that as just like a history or an archaeology or something like that, like really think it through as a kind of a science fiction project in a way, right? So, well, yeah, first just like underlying what I was saying yesterday, that really it is a pleasure for me, and it has been like really interesting to share precisely this moment while I'm writing my book with you guys, and having the opportunity of all these discussions and exchange with Jack, right? So feel free to, any comment, critique, any ideas that you have, suggestions. Also to tell you that I'm in the way I'm sharing with you the methodology, how I'm working with Foucault, but also with other sources. I'm also putting this question on the table, like how should I write this let's say retrospective science fiction, right? Of if you want to put it in this particular way, like this queer reading of the archive of the empire, if you want, right? So how should I write it? And if you have suggestions for me, ideas, I don't know. It could. I'm open to all of those things. Basically, I'm working on this project right now. Well, so I'm a little bit taking this genealogy of power regimes where I left it last time, which is the bad thing and the good things about the grand narrative, right? That you always know where you are somehow. Easy to pick up in a way. So basically, I think that I guess that it was pretty clear what I was doing with Foucault, reading Foucault through the history of feminism, and in a way understanding what Foucault calls the sovereign regime as the production of a living fiction of masculinity embodied within a particular sovereign scheme and defined by the use of necropolitical techniques. So in a way, what Foucault was calling sovereign regime, I'm trying to call that patriarchy, in a way, right? And understanding how the masculine body has been historically defined as a sovereign body, having exclusive access to the techniques of violence. And I guess that last time we kind of stopped at a point of finding or seeing the invention of new energetic machines, right? I'm using this notion from Deleuze and Guattari, machine énergétique. And as you know, Deleuze and Guattari were talking about simple energetic machines when talking, for instance, about the wheel or about the plow. But they're going to say that with the time, those machines become more complex machines, and with their own term, become machine de subjectivation. The machine's able to produce the subjectivity, which is meaning that the one that is using the machine is produced by this relationship with the technology. And we picked up we picked up a couple machines that were crucial, and both of them, one is the technology of the body, and the other one is a technology truth production as an apparatus of verification. The first one that I was pointing to was the guillotine, as which I won't go very long with the guillotine, but we could. There are many interesting things about this technique, which is the industrialization of the very necropolitical techniques, but applied for the first time to the sovereign himself, right? So you see all the complexity of this particular moment, basically, right? And mechanization, industrialization of the CADAP techniques will be an underlying character of this secularization process that is basically starting within the 15th century, and that will move towards what Foucault called disciplinary regime, and what I will define myself as heterocolonial regime, which is not exactly the same as disciplinary. I mean, meaning discipline will be one of the characteristics of this regime, but is really the politics of coloniality and the production of the female body as a public cavity, a public interior, where the national body is reproduced. That is crucial to the disciplinary regime, not discipline as such. Discipline, I mean, we could go for ages with Foucault's definition and Foucault's very detailed explanation of how the prison, the school, the factory, right, all these disciplinary institutions work. But of course, what Foucault forgot, and that we can know it only through these minor histories of slavery, of colonization, that basically are coming from the archive that Jack was wanted to mobilize yesterday. And I think that's why I think this grand narrative, quote unquote, this fake night, like a parody, it's like a dildo grand narrative, if you want to put it. It is something like that. If it's the narrative is the phallus, then my one is the dildo grand narrative. So yeah. In the sense that it's also, I mean, it's totally make up with these fragments, pieces, and these bits that are coming from these underlying traditions, without which, of course, we would end up just with a very Eurocentric history of the empire, right? So what I will try to
Can I just ask you one question?
Sure.
You said the woman is a public cavity and not disciplined as such, and then you said there were all these spaces like the hospital, the school, and the prison.
Oh, meaning not discipline as such. It's just that what I mean is that the analysis that Foucault is carrying out of modernity as a disciplinary regime is not enough. Yeah. It doesn't explain, which for me are like the two major events of modernity. One is colonialism, and the other one, the invention of femininity as interiority, where the national body will be produced and reproduced. And not only the national body, but also the labor force, which we will see that in a minute, right? And I think that this completely changes basically both the history of modernity, as Foucault is writing it, and the history of sexuality. Right? So, well, coming back to these two energetic machines that we were talking about. So one is the guillotine, this mechanization of necropolitics itself. And the other one is the printing press, right? Well, from that point on, the very relationship between the subject and the energetic machine is a feedback one. It's a performative one. We cannot talk anymore about just about the external use of the machine, but the machine defines the subject that is using it. Just a couple things more before I go on within this alternative unpacking of modernity that in a way uses some of the Foucault's insights, but at the same time, as you see, is reading Foucault with the history of colonialism, with queer critique, with, you're going to see immediately, with disability studies critique, and so on. You remember last time that I was really underlying that the sovereign body is a skin, right? It's a skin. It's a surface where the law inscribes itself, or if you want, it's a surface onto which power writes its law. This helps us to understand as well that the most characteristic sickness of the sovereign regime is the leper. The leper, right? Since basically it's the skin itself that is the location of sickness. And so let me see, I don't know if this is going to be, well, our sovereign regime is not very good, right?
You want some other pens?
Do you, someone has like a thicker one? This is a thick one, but it's red, and I don't think it's a good color.
Actually,
well, you see that what I'm doing is renaming the sovereign regime patriarchal and necropolitical.
I have a black one.
Okay, great, excellent. This is really good. Didier, Taïeb, on a un stylo. Okay. Oui, on a trouvé un. Merci.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Always prepared.
It is both necropolitical being the masculine body, the embodiment of sovereignty, and being defined by being the father, the figure of the father defined by the use of violence techniques. What we said is, if you remember last time, is that this body is not only a skin, right? And when we say this skin, it means that it's a visible, external surface. All of those things are crucial, right? And visibility, public visibility, will be the key of the political management of this body as a skin. And of course, this body doesn't have an interiority, doesn't have interiority. One particular reason, just like a historical in terms of anatomy, is that basically anatomy as the science of interiority is not yet even legal in Europe or in the Roman Empire as such, right? But it is still, even though the body is not an interiority, it is made of fluids. And I was trying to explain how basically these fluids are blood and sperm, being those convertible, right? So what is interesting here is that basically in this political history of the body, we will also have to ask how sovereignty is transmitted, how sovereignty passes through the social body. In this case, sovereignty passes through blood and through sperm. Okay, if we take this turning point of the 15th century, and you understand that when I say that it's like somebody said the other day 1453, the fall of Constantinople, or 1492. Again, it's like those are like like kind of science fiction icons, if you want, but at the same time they have their historical heaviness to it, right? So what we're going to see now, and again, I'm not going to call this disciplinary, but colonial, or if you want, sexual colonial. What we will see here is how the sovereignty that was passing through blood and sperm will come to pass through milk, and how we're going to go from the masculine sexual organs to the female womb. And I insist in this, as this public space where the national body will be fabricated. And there is no way to understand how this is happening without what is going on in terms of a colonial economy. Well,
but just sorry.
Yes.
When you say colonial,
yeah,
could you just say?
I'm going into it.
Okay, just very specific.
Oh yeah, it's very specific.
Yeah,
I mean, it's hugely specific. There is nothing into the colonial that is ideological or whatsoever. No, it is. Those are like material practices, and just think that every time that we are analyzing this relationship between, if you want, body, even though body we know that doesn't have an ontological character, the body is not defined. It doesn't really exist other than as a living political fiction, right? So we're analyzing all this stuff all the time, the relationship between body, power, and truth. And that's just a particular methodology. We could analyze other relationships, but that's the one that I'm using, right? Go to the point. Okay. Okay. Well, so basically, 1453 with the fall of Constantinople, what we will see is the impossibility of, on one side, organizing economic exchange through the East, and on the other side, finding human force of labor through war techniques on the East as well. And this can look like something very simple, but I don't know if you see how much, when we define sovereignty as necropolitical, the form of the political itself is war. Okay. So basically, a great amount of the labor force of the, we're going to say European, even though we know that it wasn't Europe as we know it right now, was constituted by slaves, And this was well before the colonization of South America, North America, and the transatlantic traffic. Just a few details that I think that are important to understand the political production of race, which for me, basically, you know, all this period that is between 15th century and again this icon of science fiction that we have here, that is 1945. All this period is about the production of race. Being sexual reproduction techniques part of race technologies, and not the opposite, And so that's why I want to give you just like a couple details that I think they're really important. In 1492, the Muslims and the Jews are being expelled from Spain, from Iberia, which wasn't Spain really at that time. So what we're seeing is a political radicalization of Christianity. Right? And for the first time as well, a management of the internal population of Europe at that time, not in terms of race, because the notion of race doesn't really exist, but in terms of purity of blood, So that's what I'm going to be tracing down here. Is basically how this notion of purity of blood that characterize sovereign ways of managing difference becomes the scientific notion of race. Well, basically, I guess that is obvious at this point that blood, when we say purity of blood, is not only a material fluid, but is also a theological, transcendental fluid, right? So it's really charged with transcendental sovereignty. As you know, these laws of purity of blood, and actually by chance, I don't know if good chance or bad chance, but anyway, I was born in Burgos, which is like the horrifying center of Iberia and the horrifying center of the empire at that point, right? So basically, I mean, if I go back to my city, it's all reminds me of the purity of blood. Well, these laws of purity of blood are established in Spain in 1449. And well, when we say laws of purity of blood, I mean, if we take our critical model, what is a law of purity of blood? I mean, is a technique of the body? Is it technology of government?
No? Technique of verification?
Is both. It's an apparatus of verification, and it's a technology of government, right? And it really an amazing one. This particular technique, will allow to discriminate non-Christians, non-Christian minorities, putting them under suspicion of practicing either Muslim or Jewish rituals. So, and I think this is interesting if we, to understand what will happen later during colonization. In the sense that basically before 1492, what we see already is an undermining of the legal status of the religious minorities in Europe. But around this notion of the purity of blood. And what is interesting is that in the purity of blood, there is no skin involved. There is no skin involved yet. Meaning that those that have purity of blood are not the white versus the non-white, right? What are the notions that are being used at that time? And I think, again, they are interesting in relationship to how colonialism will produce differences afterwards. One is the barbarian. The barbarian is the one that doesn't speak the language, right? The barbarian. So it's a linguistic definition of difference. The other one is Slavus. Slavus, from which the modern notion of a slave will come. Well, Slavus, as you can probably imagine, refers to a region, to those that are beyond the Balkans, right? The Slavs, like Slavic languages, for instance, we speak still about the Slavic languages. Since those are not Christian, right? So the Slavus is the one that, by not being Christian, can be forced to unpaid labor. Since he doesn't have, or she doesn't have, sovereignty whatsoever. And therefore is impure in terms of blood. But it's not marked by the skin. So what interests me in this, there is a French author, his name is Grégoire Chamaillou. Maybe you know probably this word? No? No? You should know. Really, really interesting. He talks about genotechnia. genotechnique, the techniques through which the genus, right, the ethnic base of the nation state is produced. Well, for us, at least for me, like as a queer critical thinker, my question is, how are we moving from a transcendental definition of sovereignty through blood to a what I'm going to call dermatological definition of race, which is the most insane and ridiculous thing that we could imagine, right? And funny enough, this is happening through the invention of dermatology as a science of the skin. Right? What we will see is a displacement from a religious transcendental model to a secular scientific regime. And at the same time, a displacement from blood to the skin in the definition of race, and through milk in the definition of sovereignty. When I started researching this thing, these technologies of race production, I was reading as mostly, since it's mostly my archive, history of medicine, right? And I came across the history of dermatology. And I couldn't, I mean, once again, I mean, this is science fiction. Our own history is science fiction. It's so ridiculous, it's almost impossible to believe. Right? So basically, modern dermatology appeared between 1618 and 1700, right? And of course, in France, right, at the very center of the empire at that time, here we are. But appeared through the treatment of the aristocratic classes of the time that start having serious skin trouble because of the white makeup, right? There is a technique, and that again, that's a technique of the body, particular one, an insane one, but a particular one that only remains now culturally available to women, unless something else to think about. I let you think about that. Many times I don't have answers for the questions that I have. So that's why, you know, we need to think about this collectively. But if we think about how makeup appears, well, makeup is used both for masculinity and femininity, and it doesn't mark sex differences, but class differences within the 16th century. Are the aristocratic classes that are using makeup. And a very particular one that is called, in France at the time, blanchiment, whitening of the faces, whitening of the faces. This blanchiment is prepared with a powder, a particular one, that when it's used regularly, become toxic for the skin. Becomes toxic for the skin. So it will be through the treatment of the blanchiment of the people that are using these makeup techniques that the modern notion of dermatology will be invented. And I think that is by no chance that precisely at the time that the notion of race is being invented as a scientific notion, the aristocratic classes in Europe are whitening their faces in such a way that we could say that whiteness is invented exactly at the same time that the notion of race in relation to the economy of slavery and the economy of the plantation is invented. And then we have another field that is immediately appearing there, which is the aesthetics of race. It's again, it's not something coming after. It's like there is no politics of race without a particular aesthetics of race. Meaning here,
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, a particular use of body technologies. Yeah.
Okay, so there are just so many different models on the table at the moment, like Slavos. This is really interesting that Slavos is the root for slave, but doesn't seem to refer to skin color. It refers, right? Not yet.
Oh, not yet. The Slavos and the barbarian are the sovereign slaves, the slaves of the sovereign regime.
Okay.
They are not yet. Well, let me back up and tell you a little bit. I would say first thing, slavery existed before colonization, right? But the legitimation of slavery was not the modern notion of race. Okay. Was the notion of purity of blood. Okay, that's one thing. Second thing, which I haven't said anything yet, but and of course this is like trying to do this in a session is just like a whatever, crazy if you want. But anyway, since we might have the opportunity of continuing this debate through the internet, through the book when it will come out, and through your questions, comments, criticisms, whatever, so we can engage in this debate and discussion. Together with these fluids that I'm sketching, these ones are organic and belong somehow to the body, right? But there are other fluids. One that will be crucial for modernity is sugar, without which neither the colonial economy nor the modern body exist as such. And basically, if we try to see where the slaves, the Slavos and the barbarians were used as labor force during medieval times, it is mostly in the sugar plantations of the south of Italy. Why? Because the sugar plantations require an enormous amount of work, of workers.
Who are the slaves? Where they come from? Who are they?
The slaves?
Yeah.
They come from the wars that are being done constantly on the east, mostly with the Muslims.
Okay,
Right.
but then there wasn't such a clear how because the skin in that sense it's not such a clear, like whiteness is a very, when you say whiteness what do you...
doesn't exist. Whiteness doesn't exist at that time as such.
Okay.
Meaning that, for instance, if you think about the sovereign of the Ottoman Empire, it's a sovereign. It doesn't matter what color is the skin.
Yeah.
It's a sovereign one. And slaves can be white.
Yeah.
It is not a question of a skin color.
Okay.
The skin color doesn't have such a relevant meaning at that time.
It's the purity of blood.
Is the purity of blood, is the belonging or not belonging to Christianity. That's why precisely when we will see, for instance, how the colonized populations in South America will be Christianized, then of course it becomes, they're going to be in trouble to use them as slaves, right? So they will have to find other ways of transforming them into, let's say, really low salaries, low wages.
So it's like there is a following between there's this following, like the first reason would be the purity of blood and the second reason would be the color of the skin.
No, I would say until the beginning of colonization in the 15th century, and more particularly until the Code Noir. Let me see if I yeah, which is the first economic treatise of slavery, right? The notion of race is not used and is not defined by skin color. Mm-hmm. You cannot find it within legal. It doesn't have any legal content. Of course, there are skin colors, but they are not attached to the notion of race. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's clear enough. That's clear enough. I mean, what I think is gonna happen is that what we will see is a biologization of economic and political relation of domination that is paradigmatic of the plantation economy. And that's how the notion of race will be produced. But it is, for the notion of race to appear, we need a different apparatus of verification. It is not religious anymore. We need a new one. And I think that this is one of the key questions for feminist movements, queer politics, is that we are fighting against an apparatus, in many cases, that doesn't have the form of the mythical or the magical narrative or the religious, but has the form of the scientific discourse. Well, I know that, I mean, this is at the same time too slow and at the same time too fast. So I don't know if I will find the right pace. It's a little crazy. I mean, I'm talking about sugar, in the sense that basically, when sugar is produced for the first time in the 15th century, from the sugar cane, again crucial. This is what in this material history we have to pay attention to. It's like, where is the sugar coming from? It is not the same if it's coming from the cane, the sugar cane, or if it's coming from the beet, the root beet. It will be completely different economy, different techniques to produce it, and therefore defining different political relationships. The sugar in the 15th century is used very rarely, very rarely. No one is consuming sugar as such. It's something that is, the amount that you will consume, it would be similar to a drug at that point. And when I say to a drug, it's not a mystery that I'm doing this narco history. This is for me the key narcotic substance of modernity, sugar. Of course, have in coffee, right? But sugar is even more important because basically by the 18th century, when the plantation economy has developed, sugar has become a major ingredient of all food arrangements. It's a component, a crucial component of the diet, of the modern diet, which will significantly modify the body itself. The modern body is a sugar body. It cannot be understood without the sugar. Well, what for me is interesting, and probably is also being from Spain myself and having, just like looking back to the origin of the empire, right? Is that basically after you have the development of these small sugar plantations in Italy, what you will see is how the Portuguese and the Spanish will take those sugar plantations to Africa, and first to the islands, Santo Tomé, Madeira, the Canaries. What happened in the Canaries, basically? The Guanches population of the Canaries was exterminated, and the island was completely transformed into a sugar plantation. Once the local population has been exterminated, the Portuguese immediately need to bring workers for the sugar plantation. And that's exactly how the transatlantic trade will start. By finding workers for these little islands, and it's not by chance that those are islands. The island, it is always, and we will see, we won't have time, but you can, you know probably that story, you can read it in my other book. The position of Puerto Rico in the history of the development of the pill. How islands are political, experimental laboratories, right? In this case, the Canaries, Madeira, Santo Tomé, are the small, the micro experimental places where the sugar plantation economy will develop. And then, of course, then you have the rest you probably already know. Right, basically, after 1492, you have the development, the huge development of the sugar plantation economy in America. Together with, of course, not only sugar, of course, right? But other plantations, knowing that the sugar plantation will be the economic model for all of them. Let me see how I can pack this long story short. And now we see a different definition of the slave. Since basically the slave within the sovereign regime was protected by the sovereign. What we will see with the development of modern capitalism is a necroeconomy. An economy where for the first time the worker is totally expendable. So you know that the worker within the transatlantic trade is called pièce d'Inde, the Indian piece, and is defined as a male slave between 15 and 35 and equals 18 months of work. So if we take, for instance, the history of colonization of Silvia Federici, I don't know if it's an author that you read or not.
Mhm.
It's an Italian feminist that went to the US, then working in Africa for a few years, and has this book that is called The Caliban and the Witch, right? That just was translated in French recently. But well, what Federici is saying is that the first machine of the Industrial Revolution is a living one. It's a living machine. It's the slave himself or herself. Even more, what Silvia Federici is saying is that the crucial living machine is not even la pièce d'Inde, the slave himself, but the female slave as the place where the labor force is reproduced. Even more, we could say that Africa in modernity becomes the uterus of the plantation, right? But I like to underline this necroeconomic side, meaning the condition of possibility of the Industrial Revolution is having expendable bodies transformed into labor machines. This expendability, I mean, I'm saying this because basically we're now very much turning to the analysis of neoliberalism, right? Well, this expendable character of the human body is right at the origin of capitalism. It's nothing new. It's nothing new. Well, what you see here, and if you read Hortense Spieler text, that it was a suggestion of Jack, and I totally love that text, and I think it helps me a lot reading the very techniques of the body that are going to be used within colonization. And of course, many of them are not only restriction techniques, but they mark the skin itself. They mark the skin. They work the body of the slave as a skin. For us, or at least for me, the question is how it's possible that a political minority, here in terms of number, right? Not a political minority in the sense of Deleuze as a reservoir of political transformation, let's say a minority in number, how a minority of colonizers could maintain their political and economic superiority within the context of the plantation economy. And this is a question that we can even ask today in terms of neoliberalism. How is it possible that like a 1, or even not 1, 0.11% of the the global population, control the totality of the world, right? And still maintain their domination, maintain their hegemony. For instance, in the Caribbean, the slaves are 85% of the population. When you are 85% of the population, I mean, what prevents you from taking power? Right? I mean, in North America, in 1790, there are like 100 million slaves. By 1869, there are 4 million. So, I mean, what I think we need to think is how are we managing that radical asymmetry in terms of techniques of government? How is possible to govern a population like that? By what means? Just remember, even though we didn't have the time to really develop, but if you think how sovereignty is transmitted to the social body, well, you have the king, and if, for instance, if you have the representatives of the king in the different regions of the nation, they have to be connected somehow to the body of the king, right? So it has to be, it's like the relationship between the king and God, right? It has to be a connection, a link between the sovereign and those that gain sovereignty through that proximity. Well, the question with the colonial displacement is how to maintain sovereignty for the colonizer, once that is like, you know, it's being displaced from this proximity with the king. And I mean, I wanna, what I wanna share with you is that basically, I don't think we have the answers yet. That we you know, there have been like many histories of colonialism, but I don't think we have yet all the answers, right? Even to that question, like how sovereignty is being maintained in spite of physical distance and political distance, when, for instance, you have the independence of the colonies. And still, would you maintain that sovereignty? So how is that possible? Well, most of the historians of colonization coming from the radical black tradition would say that precisely the notion of race will allow to legitimize this transfer of sovereignty. Meaning that for the first time, the sovereignty won't come through the particular relationship between the colonizer and the king, but it will be now defined scientifically by the notion of race. You have the right to the monopoly of the use of techniques of government, which is what power is, basically, the monopoly of the use of the techniques of government. because you're racially superior. And that is not being defined by the relationship to the king, nor to the relationship to the divine, but is defined by science, otherwise by nature itself. So it's not, you see that it's completely different. I mean, it's not a transcendental definition of hegemony, of superiority. It's completely immanent one.
Can you give examples of scientific kind of verification of this kind?
Other than race, you mean?
No, like example of scientific, because you say that now it's verified by science and not by the transcendental, but some kind of historical examples that science have used. Are you speaking about, for example, from Nazism, all of their experiments in physiognomy and starting from that, and then?
Well, I mean, we always go to Nazism because, in a sense, we think that it's like the paradigmatic, almost like hyperbolic case, right, of the use of science in a necropolitical way. Mm-hmm. But we don't need to go to Nazism. For instance, I mean, in order to understand how the notion of race is invented, there is no way that we can do it without the history of anthropology itself and the history of dermatology itself. Mm-hmm. So therefore, anthropology and dermatology being both scientific discourses, they're not the apparatus of verification of anthropology is not the Bible whatsoever. It is not. It is the book of nature, which is very different than the Bible. Right?
But it has been demystified. Like both of them had been demystified by post-colonial discourses as well.
Absolutely.
So anthropology is kind of a big laugh, like a lot of the time now, or in contemporary post-colonial critique. Mm-hmm. So what I would be interested in contemporary examples of this kind of
contemporary examples.
Yeah, of
I would say
that, for example, things that have not been demystified yet.
Anthropometrics. I mean, every time you go through the that you crossing a frontier. Your body is being diagnosed according to anthropometric criteria.
Yeah, of course.
Saying if you're like Caucasic or not Caucasic or Asian or black, whatever, right? Or even, for instance, that we won't have the time to go through all of that, but how, for instance, the print, the fingerprint print was invented in India first to manage the colonial population, and then was extended to the whole population of England as, let's say, a democratic device. Mm-hmm. So we will also see that, which is a huge debate within Jack, I guess this is well read.
And stem cells.
What?
And the whole discourse about stem cells, of course.
Of course, yeah. But there's a whole debate within the history of colonialism, to know if governmental techniques, and precisely necropolitical ones, have been experienced, tested, developed within the colonies, and then extended to the rest of the population, or, I mean, if we have that relationship or not. I don't think historically, we need to say it's always this way. I don't think we need to be historically deterministic in terms of how these techniques are invented and how they are used. But what is crucial for us is knowing that the apparatuses of verification that are being used are not religious, mystical anymore, but are scientific itself. And more particularly, for instance, which I think this is Elsa Dorland that you know, that is doing this research within the French archive and seeing, for instance, how the, let's say, anthropologists, but I mean, it's interesting as well to know or to see who are in particular periods of time the inventors, quote unquote, of apparatuses of verification. In the sense that in 1684, for instance, François Vernier, which is one of the first that will use the notion of race, or 84, sorry. He is, at the same time, is working for the French government, is a physician, is a traveler, is an anthropologist, is also a businessman, right? And it has a particular privilege in relationship to the codification of semiotic machines. And he's the first one that in his diaries is going to use this notion of race to establish a distinction between different, what he's calling different peoples, right? His book is called Nouvelle division de la Terre selon les différentes espèces et races d'hommes. So the new division of the earth according to the distinction between races and peoples. And it's the first one that it will say there is a difference between white, black, Asiatic, and Laponians, whatever, right? Whatever. I mean, what is interesting for us is that race doesn't have, like gender, doesn't have any ontologic content. And I don't know if it's clear for anyone. I mean, for everyone in this class, of course. But there are people around there that think that race or gender or even sexual difference are ontologic realities, right? And what we know through the history of science is that race is the effect of a series of representation regimes that will come to legitimize the particular relationship, economic and political one, that makes possible the plantation economy. And what is interesting about the François Verniers is that immediately he's going to link the issue of the different races to the improvement of the purity of the national race. And he's going to come up with a very interesting solution that is, for the first time, a particular technology of reproduction. He's going to say, let's import beautiful women in such a way that we improve the national race. And just to show you the completely arbitrary character of these notions, the women that Vernier is thinking about, or is thinking about, are women from Kashmir. I mean, which is beyond white, non-white. But he's just traveling, right? And he finds that the women, he's saying in his treatise, the women of Kashmir are the most beautiful. So Vernier is the first one that is coming up with this idea of a trade of white slaves to improve the purity of the national body, to improve the purity of the national body. So attached to the very notion of race from the very beginning comes a technique of reproduction to define or redefine the national body. At least, well, this is a hypothesis, right?
Right, because I mean, at that point, nobody would have had a theory of reproduction that could have been the basis for thinking about a sort of eugenic improvement of the race, for example. That's, the science isn't there in the 17th century. And I mean, okay, it's a little bit later, but you have somebody like Buffon, comes 100 years later, and Buffon is saying that skin is determined by environment, and there's a whole environmental theory of race there.
Right.
You know, I mean, for me, again, it's the fixing of an origin point. I think there's a lot of merit. I mean, the question of skin is really interesting, except that contemporary theorists of race want to really push back on the idea that skin color is somehow the trace, the marker of race, because as you say, race is not ontological, therefore skin is just the fiction, it's the fictional surface of a narrative that has been woven elsewhere in relationship to different components, one of which in the in the 18th century would have been environment. Oh, people who live in the Andes are very small, people who live in the plains of Africa are very tall, and those kinds of distinctions were also meaningful. So, I mean, a lot of people, it seems to me, would not really think about the onset of modern race until the late 18th, beginning of the 19th century, when you get this clash between money, civilization, conquest.
Yeah, but what I totally agree, and this debate on the environmental definition of race is going to be crucial, right? Because the whole and how even the climatic differences in different peoples and so on. But I think that even if we're having to point, the 15th century and the 18th century, let's say, they're like a multiplicity of definitions of with legitimate political relationships of power, right? But and that is my contention. I don't know. We can discuss about that. But what I think is going to be crucial at a certain point is linking reproduction and race production.
Yeah. Right, but let's just take the skin thing for a moment. I mean, you could open as a dermatological, dermatologist time, and the aristocracy are becoming more and more pockmarked with the mercury and the powder, and so on. But I'm still having a hard time sort of relating that to race, given that another theorist, somebody like Deborah Poole, who writes about the production of race in the Andes, would say that this is a part of an emergent visual economy, that it's not in it's not the skin itself, it's that a visual regime of knowing. It begins to take root such that surfaces take on new meaning, both in terms of indigenous photography by somebody like Martin Chambi in Peru, as well as in terms of these European colonizers who are coming and scanning the surface of difference and then making narratives out of them. So I want to ask about the science provides an explanation for the system of race that the governmental technique wants to use. So if in one moment it wants to say Europeans are superior because they're taller, then suddenly we say, the environment unfortunately stunts the growth of people in South America, therefore, and in Africa we have pygmies, and this reduction in stature proves a certain kind of superiority, and it's all going to be about size, and then you have Gulliver's Travels, and you have the large people and the little people, and then at another moment it's going to be skin, but skin is, and I think that you're unfolding this, it seems to me that skin is like it's one stopping point on the way to developing the theory of race that in the end, right, comes back to blood, as it turns out.
Exactly. That is something really interesting in the sense that basically the skin is just like a passing through.
It's a fetish for fact.
Yeah,
By the
exactly.
time you get
It
to
is.
Fanon, it's laid out as a
Exactly.
fetish. The fact of blackness that is being written onto skin is a complete fiction. It's not. There's no fact. There's no fact of blackness.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I'm saying
Where
when
you
I say
get
that
to.
it doesn't have any ontological
No.
character. But for me, it's the centrality of the skin within the sovereign regime. You know, like
Is it
Oh.
central?
in the sovereign regime, has to be said through the body, about the body, on the skin, by marking the skin, in any different way.
Marjorie Garber would say, no, it's not the skin, it's the clothes. And so you have these
It's just
vestry codes
it's a
and laws.
secondary skin. The
Right,
clothes
it's a secondary
is
skin, but it's still
social
not the skin. And it's that they're a skin that have nothing to do with science, for example. And so this is why you have so many women who are able to pass as men in the 17th century, because the distinction between skin as the truth of the body and the clothing as the truth of the body is not so clear. It's clear to us. We think we know that what lies below the clothes is the truth of the body.
Absolutely.
But that would not have been true in 17th century Mexico, for example, after conquest, you know, where now you have this Spanish understanding of, you know, a particular normative body or whatever. But so many of these legal statutes to govern difference pass through clothing. Like you were saying it the other day. You said, you know, masculinity is a spectacle because, and then we look at the clothing of the 17th century and we see these guys dressed up like little peacocks, right? A framing of the codpiece, you know, it's like here the phallus has to be hidden. There the phallus has to be presented.
Yeah, what I mean by skin is it's a surface
Any
that can be marked, that can be socially marked.
Okay.
Right. So that's why I think that the race, precisely because it doesn't have an ontological content,
Absolutely.
has to find a surface where to mark differences, and that is going to be at one point. It won't be stable. It will pass through. It won't be stable. But for instance, it's just even if we get into the code noir, the economic exchange of treaties of exchange of slaves, right? The amount of differences in color is so ridiculously, you know, exaggerated.
Right.
That differences that are not even, it wouldn't be visible for us right now. It would be almost impossible. You have to be a slavery businessman of that time to be able to
even understand. But at the same time, the gradations of color are there because of the one drop rule, which says one drop of black blood infects the whole body. You're black because you have one drop of black blood.
But Jack, you have it. That's exactly what it is. Has to be how you recognize the purity of blood once you get into the scientific taxonomies of the visual. This is, I mean, the purity of blood is not visual, cannot be seen in the sovereign regime. That's why, for instance, through torture, what you need is to speak. You need to say, I believe in God, or I'm not, I'm a Muslim, or I'm converted. So you have to go through the spoken word actually to finally inscribe if you are Christian or not. So your blood purity, in a sense, cannot be seen. It's invisible. Right. So I understand what you mean. Maybe it's true that that probably, since basically I'm trying to trace within the body. This is part of my project. Trying not to lose track of the body in every instance. Sure. Because what I think that is happening many times is that
the story is told sort of absent a body. Yeah.
Exactly. In such a way that which is for instance clear and really interesting in the Hortense Spieler text, where basically the body is the center of her own narrative as well.
The body, but language. I mean, that's almost
well,
that's
but
really a
it-
deconstructive process.
Absolutely.
Because
But
it's a
even,
grammar.
even language as part of the body of the
Right.
slave, this
Right.
possibility of speaking,
Right.
right? So, but it's still like not. Yeah, maybe this obsession with tracking the techniques of the body and how the maybe because of this project, which is this kind of political thinking of the body as a political archive. So trying to see
What
each
the
time
okay,
how
within
how
your
the body,
project,
which it doesn't mean that I'm at this point reducing race to skin. No, on the contrary. What I'm trying is to show how within a particular discourse, the skin becomes itself. I mean, it's like the living political fiction. Since I mean, the skin. That's why skin can be toxified. The skin can be marked, and it is the organic plastic character of the body as opposed to any other thing. The living organic character, in such a way that basically can be modified. Today we will say genetically, right? But even when if we go all the way to the pharmacopornographic and we see how race, for instance, now, of course, I mean nobody that is in his mind or her mind could say now that basically there is an ontologic, biological base to race, but there are still, in different places, like even in. For instance, if you think about Israel and the way in which race is being defined now by promoting Israeli couples for reproduction, but I think that is for me the key. Even beyond the skin is a result of reproduction techniques, even if you want. And for me, what is crucial within this archaeology, if you want, is the position that the uterus as place of reproduction will take. And of course, that when you were saying, Jack, right now, is like, well, how is this happening if basically science at that point is not really defining, they don't really know, quote unquote,
Right.
like relationship of truth, right? They don't really know how reproduction is taking place, right? And let me show you very, very fast. It's already 7 o'clock, and I wanted to like somehow finish by 8. But if you want to interrupt me or say whatever, I mean, feel free to do it. But just
Beto?
yeah.
Going back to the, would you like to take a break now, or you want to keep going until 8 o'clock? Or?
Can I just like go through a very fast kind of microgenealogy of the uterus just for a second? So we because that's exactly what I think is crucial to this particular regime. It's like, and I don't see it so often within the historians of colonialism that are not coming from feminism, which the whole discussion is precisely like either how race is described or how race is resisted, as what are the ways of resisting or surviving and so on. But what I don't see so often is this connection with, simply, to put it simply, race as a technology of reproduction. That's it. It's simply that, which would explain the centrality of heterosexuality within the modern project. Right? Why this obsession? Why? Which is at this point is a ridiculous obsession. I mean, there's no other way. I mean, it's not that myself that I'm totally crazy. It's that we are intoxicated by this, by a political mystique of the heterosexuality. Right? Just very fast, because I think it's interesting in order to engage with the discussion that Jack pointed out about, how is this happening if the scientific discourse don't know exactly, right? So, well, if you think about how the uterus is represented within anatomic treatises or even birth guides, right? Medieval midwives guides, for instance. I don't know, what would you think? I mean, if I show you these without telling you that I'm going to tell you like the microhistory, political history of the uterus, you think, well, I don't know what it is, right? And let me show you some more, and then let's see what you think about it. If it's something that is striking for you within these images. Well, this is the very well known by Leonardo da Vinci, that is praised always as one of the most, quote unquote, realistic ones. But it's still, it might be something that is shocking to you. I don't know if it's something that is particularly striking. And then if not, I tell you what is striking for me. Anyone?
Towards the others?
So we're getting close to the 17th century, right? Those are midwives. This one is the first midwife guide, and really done for women and probably by women in medieval times. And this one that is really amazing, that I always think that it's like a kind of a premonition of the pharmacopornographic time as connected to the global multimedia placenta. Right? And, okay. Well, I tell you what it was shocking for me when I started doing this research is that all these images or representations of the uterus are bodiless. They are disincorporated. The female body is not there. Right? Okay. Well, so the question is, where is reproduction taking place? Here. Reproduction is taking place here, in the transcendental, right? And it's taking place, of course, in sperm and through blood, but the female body is just an accidental passage, right? So basically, in all these representations, what is crucial is how the sperm, because of course the theories at that time is that the homunculus, right? You have it here, the homunculus, meaning the fetus, is completely contained within a drop of a sperm, which comes back a little bit to the whole, this logic, this economic logic of the drop, always, right? The drop of blood, the drop of the sperm, where everything is contained. Waste is contained in a drop of blood, and the whole human body is contained in the blood, in the drop of sperm, right? So basically, reproduction within the sovereign regime is patrilinear. It's going through the father and happening within the father fluids, right? Now, some of these images are really funny as well, I think. I like them a lot, even though, and this, I think, belongs to our collective science fiction or history. Right? When we look back to them, we have been that. Right? So somehow we are very close to that. And then look what is happening. Look what is happening precisely right at the upheaval of the colonial time. What is happening is that little by little, what we will see is really the falling down of the uterus from the transcendental down, 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 first to the domestic space, which is very funny in this case, in this representation of Berrettini, because you see the reproductive process taking place within the wall itself. I mean, it's not inscribed within the female body. It's inscribed within architecture. It's amazing. I don't know how they written in his mind. Again, isn't this like a science fiction, right? Well, but I think it's very interesting because in a way, and this might also be interesting for us to think about contemporary practices of subrogated reproduction, meaning, for instance, the right or not to rent a uterus, right? So historically, we inherit this architectural definition of reproduction, in which the female body is the architecture where reproduction is having place. And you see, I mean, this is nothing very stable. I mean, there will be like comings and goings. I mean, it's not like again, these histories are not fully. There is not a radical break, meaning that basically this definition of human generation as having place within the drop of a sperm, in a way, will be there and will maintain and come up to the genes. Yeah. Right? So it's interesting as well in relation to what you were saying, Jack, in the sense that basically if we think these regimes not as periods, but as a knowledge organizations, right? Then we find them. We can find this particular relationship between body, truth, and power in the 20th century, operating within a relationship with other regimes. Right? And of course, look at this image, for instance, which I think is probably you know William Hunter, and another. This is a horror science fiction, right? But I think it's amazing in the sense that basically you have this process of incorporation within the body, but this is a subjectless body, right? So you have a kind of a certain production of femininity, but in which the female body is not yet a political subject. And of course, by the 18th century, what we have is the use of the techniques of the portrait to underline the process of subjectification of the female body, and particularly of the fetus. I don't know if you see it very well, but I mean, the whole body is skinless, but Gautier has preserved the face and the nasciturus, the one that will be born, right? And even a little bit of the breast. And if you allow me, sorry for this, but so this is what I'm interested into, precisely. It is this relationship between the development of capitalism and colonization and the invention of what John Scott, for instance, called this paradoxical citizenship, meaning a female body that is, of course, the white body that is progressively going to become subject of the democratic European states, but who contains within herself a domain that is regulated by the state and therefore doesn't really belong to her. Mm. So you have this paradoxical tension between, on one side, a political subject, and on the other side, an enormous amount of devices of control and surveillance operating within the body itself. And what is interesting about the Code Noir that I was telling you before, and I think that we always have to read the Code Noir in relationship to the foundations of liberalism, because maybe otherwise it might be totally impossible to understand what we call now neoliberalism. So basically, in the 17th century, you have exactly at the same time the Code Noir and John Locke. John Locke defining the subject by freedom and property. And underneath the Code Noir, where you're gonna have, I mean, it would be, I mean, if you have time, I don't know, have you ever read the Code Noir? No one? Yeah, well, go and do it. I mean, it's a text that you can easily find on the internet. It's not really, I mean, there are two versions, one of the 17th century and the other one of the 18th century. And it's a small text, and it's absolutely crucial to understand modernity. The first thing that is being said in the Code Noir is that the Muslims and the Jews will not be able to settle themselves as colonizers within the new territories, and will not be allowed to possess slaves. Interesting. They cannot possess slaves. And there are many, many things that are being said. All of them have to do with, mostly, with who can use the technologies of government and which ones are the techniques of the body that one has access to. For instance, one of the narrative elements of the Code Noir that for us is almost insane, I mean, we don't even understand what's going on, is that the slaves will not be allowed to have or to use weapons, and will not be allowed to have dogs or animals, since they are considered animals themselves. So they cannot have properties. So precisely, they are not political subjects because they cannot be defined as Locke will do it, for instance, in terms of freedom and property. The second element that is crucial in the Code Noir is the prohibition of interracial marriage. And this is not present within the first one, precisely because the very notion of race doesn't exist yet. So it's very difficult to see who can marry who. And that's again, that's where the scheme becomes very useful. Because of course, you need a visual taxonomy to regulate reproductive practices. Right? So for the second Code Noir, you have this very strong prohibition of interracial marriages that, as we know, will prevail long after the abolition itself. So that's what I mean, other historians of colonization are paying attention to other things that are certainly relevant. But the thing that I'm looking into, or the two things that I'm looking into, is particularly how the techniques of the body function as governmental techniques, and how reproduction is going to become a technology of race production. And for this, we need, and then 7:30 and time is catching us, and I feel like I run and then I tell you bits and pieces, and then the grand narrative becomes like really fragmented. So maybe it's a good thing. We don't know. I tell you just about milk. So you see that it's not only the skin, but it's, and again, what I'm tracking down here is the body obsessively, and the materiality of it, right? The fluids. And of course, this could be done through languages, through other things, but so milk, and you will say like, why milk here, right? Because precisely at a certain point, what will become important is, on one side, regulating the reproduction of non-white and white women, and on the other side, separating black milk from white milk. Of course, black milk is, you would see, it's an oxymoron, doesn't exist. Well, it exists in the literature of the 18th century. Is the milk that's precisely produced by non-white women. And again, this is a technology of government that is going to be defined in scientific terms. And I think that, I mean, we won't ever get to the invention of homosexuality, heterosexuality, or not to say later to intersexuality or transsexuality. But I think that this part of the complexity that we have to deal with in both in identity politics and in any sexual politics is that the apparatus of verification that we're working with, among other things, of course, now is in a pharmacopornographic regime is even more complex than that, in the sense that it is defined by the market and by the media, not only by scientific discourse. But if we take the 19th century, well, scientific discourse is like so prominent that it's almost impossible to go through. And all the narratives of emancipation within modernity are narratives of secularization. Do you know what I mean? Basically, there is no narrative that is saying what we have to do is to abandon the scientific discourse. There are very few narratives within modernity going that way. I mean, we have to get to basically precisely critical feminist readings of feminist discourse, right? Which is, I mean, this is like a yesterday morning, isn't it? So very, very fast, the role of milk within the story, and then I promise I stop, and then we have a discussion or whatever, because I mean, it is not. I think that at this point it's not so important to go really to unpack the whole history, and you know, it would take me forever. As maybe to understand the methodology and maybe, you know, work onto that. So first thing that is interesting is that I don't know if you have noticed that basically the human animal belongs in scientific terms to the class of the mammals. So basically we have to say what are we as animals within the zoological taxonomy is basically we are mammals, right? Which means that basically the species is defined by the relationship to the breast. And this is a question that even Darwin will ask. It's a question to Linné, that basically is the zoologist that is going to define the human species by not only the human species, but all the mammals, by the relationship between the mother and the child, and the practice of sucking milk. Right? And then Darwin, when he comes to this zoological taxonomy, is going to ask, well, how could it be if basically men don't have breast, right? So are men less human or less mammals than the mother mammal, and therefore they are less zoologically pure? Right? Well, this is, what I'm just trying to tell you that first, the notion of mammal is invented in the 18th century, is invented by Linné. And interesting enough, there is, as with race, there is a huge debate in Europe at that time. Europe, of course, this is happening in Europe, even though all this discursive upheaval cannot be separated from what is going on in the colonies. So there is a huge discussion as in order to know if the human being has to be defined by the fact that is a mammal, or by the fact that, for instance, Auriga gabiga, that we have ears that have a particular form, particular shape, and that is not something that is happening for all species, right? Or, for instance, another zoologist is proposing at the time the notion of pilosa, meaning animals with hair. So what I'm trying to say is that, and Jack that likes a lot the silliness of the things that define us, right? Well, this is, if you go back to the discussion in the 18th century, is the most ridiculous silly discussion. It's a discussion between these high zoologists that are like discussing in order to know if what the definition of the human should be is the hair, the ear, or the breast. And if you read them, it's like, this is insane. These people are learned. And then the question is why the breast will become so important, and why sucking milk will be so crucial as to define the human species.
What about, isn't there a debate also about genitals outside the body or inside?
Absolutely.
So the hanging penis is a big deal, the pendulous penis that not many animals
Exactly.
have.
Exactly.
And there's like the bat and the human, I think.
Exactly, and that will be even the case in relation to race, for instance, when women, non-white women, will be defined by the size of the clitoris, for instance, as what we call labia minora, right? So it's a whole debate that, if we go back into the history of science, is just completely, of course it's absolutely impossible for us to understand. But what I think is interesting is why, in a particular moment, a notion gets crystallized and takes a particular political density. Right? And in terms of methodology, I think that the question that we have to ask behind, or one of the questions, at least the one that I'm trying to ask behind, is what is the technique of the body attached to a particular organ? Meaning, what are the techniques of the body attached to the breast? And then we discovered that in the 16th century, women could actually sell, well, this is done today in different societies, but it's not the case anymore, for instance, in the West, that women can sell their breastfeeding services. Which, if you think about it, it is very interesting in the sense that milk, therefore, is a force of labor that can circulate horizontally within society, right? It can be the object of a market exchange. You can sell your milk, and you can sell a very particular practice, which is breastfeeding. So there are a great amount of women, of course, of the lower classes, that may make a living through breastfeeding. And what Linné is going to do is calling attention to the possibility of degenerating the purity of the races through a contamination by milk. So he is saying each mother should breastfeed her own child. Otherwise, the purity of the classes and the races will not be maintained. And even he's saying, and this is interesting, I think, in terms of politics, he's saying that we should move from wet nurses into dry nurses. I mean, it's a good idea to have workers, non-white workers, slaves, taking care of the children. But they should do it dry, without the fluids. Because those body fluids, they allow for the transmission of race. So, and these treaties, which is published in 1752, and it's called the Step Nurse, it's going to become so well known at the time. I mean, it's interesting that Linnaeus is like really the father of zoology. I mean, it's like probably the most important, one of the most important scientific figures of the 18th century. Right? It's like, I don't know, like Bill Gates of the time, something like that. And at the same time that he's writing these zoological treatises, he's also like a pamphletist. You know, he's writing all these pamphlets, right, that will become as important as the zoological taxonomies. And by the end of the century, what you see is the entrance within the law of these prohibitions of breastfeeding. So what we have is a privatization of milk. Really, what Linné is doing is creating a milk frontier between the races. And even more than that, he's even saying that breastfeeding should only be done within the domestic space. Within the domestic space. Because otherwise, you know, the generation is always around the corner. So we have to be. I'm just like showing you some of the images in order for you to see how much like breastfeeding at that time was an economic practice. And that is something else that I'm trying to do in terms of methodology. For instance, Foucault was so reluctant to engage in the detailed discussion of economic regimes as this, you know, this kind of a almost rejection of Marx, that he, in a way, he's unable to discuss the relationship between biopolitics and economic regimes. And we need to do it, but no economic regimes only in terms of the factory and the factory labor, but also in terms of bodily practices that were part of the economy within the, for instance, in the 17th century, and that will not be allowed in the 18th century. And I think that is even, it's interesting to think about breastfeeding in relationship to sex work practices, right? In the sense that basically, I mean, is let's say, can we consider sex work as, or sex services, if you want, as a practice that could be part of an economic exchange, or not? And if not, why? What are the reasons? And if yes, why? So I mean, I guess that now, even breastfeeding now looks to us really weird. I don't know if. So again, basically, by the end of the, and this is taking shape within the between 16th and 18th century. Right? Like these are the wet nurses of the time, and of course, by the end you get into the 18th century, what you have is, on one side, and this is also interesting, you have the regulation of the breast, the extraction of the breast from the economic exchange, and the erotization of the breast. And you cannot separate those. You need to erotize the breast in order to give it a plus value, surplus value, once you have taken out all of the economic value that it could have from the medieval times up to the 17th century. Right? So this is just like an example of how basically milk and the uterus are going to be used as technology subject of race production. And I mean, well, it's 7:45. Maybe it's a good time to even make a break, have a discussion. Yeah.
Maybe there are questions from people online.
Maybe
Yes.
questions from people online.
Earlier, whenever you were talking about coffee and sugar, they brought up Foucault and biopolitics, and had mentioned that. Here we are. Okay, I'll just go ahead and phrase it. Have you examined the economic and political relations around spices, herbs, stimulants, tea, and coffee? Within colonist regimes, I believe it was Foucault who said that while the royalty obtained legitimacy by birth and inheritance, regardless of their physical condition, the bourgeoisie established their dominance by physical fitness and mental capacity, health, education, and capacity for production. It was the bourgeoisie who were concerned with genetic purity, health, and thus biopower. So, have you examined political, economic relations?
Actually, what I really would like to bring up is, have you looked at Maria Mee's
okay, hold on. Let me unmute.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, the microphone's unmuted. Can you?
Yes, it is. My microphone is not muted. Right.
Hello? Yeah, I can
Yeah.
hear you. Okay, I'll just go ahead and phrase it.
Okay, yeah. It's
The economic and political relations around spices, herbs, stimulants, tea, and coffee. Within colonist regimes, I believe it was Foucault who said that while the royalty obtained legitimacy by birth and inheritance, regardless of their physical condition, the bourgeoisie established their dominance by physical fitness and mental capacity, health, education, and capacity for production. It was the bourgeoisie who were concerned with genetic purity, health, and thus biopower.
It's like a mind
So,
fuck,
have you
yeah.
examined?
So, for some reason, it's repeating itself. But anyway, what I would like to bring up is further.
Okay, hold on. Let me unmute.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, the microphone's unmuted. Can you?
Yes, it is. My microphone is not muted.
Hello? Oh. Okay,
Okay, can I talk? Is it going through now?
Well, maybe we make a break anyway.
Okay.
We need a break. Yeah.
Oh, I see the problem. Okay. Cool.
Okay. Are you going to take a break, or can I ask a question? Just